a poem actually attracted me when I was younger as on the end caps of the Firthy water tanks, and that was in steel edged lettering that it went good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better best. Fairly simple, but that really resonated with me, and I always continue that on.
Where there is a will, there is a way, which really has been something I realise I've lived by. So having the willingness to just turn up to doing some crazy radical things that I envision and trusting that life will support me in it has proved to help me feel so optimistic about ideas and things that I want to do in life. So to contribute, really.
I was given a really good concept many years ago, and I stick to it, and I keep my faith in the greater benefic and always believe that something good is going to happen.
It's always changing, but I would say in this particular context, when I've spoken to anyone about this vision of a better normal, of bringing kind of these soft skills into correctional services, everyone I've spoken to has been very positive and really feels for this particular area of reaching out. So that makes me very optimistic.
Always, whether it's small stuff at home or at work or the larger environment or society, I think they're always trying to, have that curiosity to how to do things better, how to improve.
Hi, it's Victor Perton here at the Centre for Optimism, and it is a delight to be here today because we're talking about what works and what doesn't work in the correctional system and how to build things even better. And I'm delighted to be joined by my good friend Maureen Chen. Maureen, of course, joined me for the launch of her wonderful book about mysticism, spirituality, an Australian in Asia. Maureen Chen, welcome.
Yes, very nice to be here.
Claire Seppings, a criminal justice consultant, a Churchill Fellow in 2015, a member of the Women's Correctional Services Advisory Committee, doing marvellous things in the correctional system. Claire, welcome.
Thank you, Victor.
Sonia Stocko, facilitator, somatic therapist, co-creator of Courageous Communication and Radical Empathy, and she facilitates courageous communication in prisons in central Victoria. Welcome, Sonia.
Thank you. Hi.
A delight to have you. And then Ross Egleton. Ross is a facilitator, but in particular, he's the expert on men's behavioural change and the family violence workshop development. He's also chair of the Maldon District Community Bank. He's worked in the Loddon Prison Precinct, including self-development, literacy, culture, health and wellbeing. Ross, it's a huge welcome to you.
Great to be here. Thanks, Victor.
Now, as all of you who join us in the Centre for Optimism know, that the first thing we always do in every one of our events is to ask our participants, what makes you optimistic? And Maureen, seeing you've had practice in the Optimism Cafe, may I ask you, Maureen, what makes you optimistic?
It's always changing, but I would say in this particular context, when I've spoken to anyone about this vision of a better normal, of bringing kind of these soft skills into correctional services, everyone I've spoken to has been very positive and really feels for this particular area of reaching out. So that makes me very optimistic.
Claire Seppings, what makes you optimistic?
Well, I guess like Maureen says, I mean, often it changes throughout your life, but I was given a really good concept many, many years ago, and I stick to it. And I keep my faith in the greater benefic, and always believe that something good is going to happen.
A beautiful classic definition that goes back 700 years. That's wonderful. Sonia Stocko, what makes you optimistic?
I have thought long and hard about this question, and I came down to one little sentence today, and it was, where there is a will, there is a way, which really has been something I realise I've lived by. So having the willingness to just turn up to doing some crazy radical things that I envision, and trusting that life will support me in it, has proved to help me feel so optimistic about ideas and things that I want to do in life. So to contribute, really. Yeah, thanks.
Brilliant, brilliant. And Ross Egleton, what makes you optimistic?
That's a good question. Thanks, Victor. It's just my just the eternal quest for to make things better, to always improve, to always whether it's small stuff at home or at work or the larger environment or society. I think yeah, always trying to you know, have that curiosity to how to do things better, how to improve and make some changes. And a poem actually attracted me when I was younger, as the on the end caps of the Firthy water tanks, and that was in steel edged lettering that it went good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better best. Fairly simple, but that really resonated with me, and I always continue that on, mixing with a bit of work-life balance as well.
What a great memory. I remember that, but I'm old enough to still have had dictation, Ross. And I can remember that from dictation in grade 1. So
okay, yeah. Well, that was from Central Victoria and Shepparton, and you know, that was their eternal quest to have better production.
fantastic. Well, Maureen Chen, you know, you conceived this program, and this is your great passion to make the world a better place and to bring these programs into prisons and beyond. Maureen, can I throw to you to ask our guests more about what they do and what is the best?
Thank you very much, Victor. Actually, I haven't met in person, neither any of these, the panelists, and I really thank you for coming on and sharing what you do. And I just search for people who are doing great things out there in correctional services. And the people we have with us today have a huge amount of experience. It's going to be quite a challenge to fit it into an hour. And I know some of the listeners also have experience, and we'd like to hear from you as well. So I think if you permit, we'll go straight into this discussion. And I would like to, first of all, ask Sonia to share what she has done in the prisons, because I have a passion for non-violent communication, and that's how I found Sonia, through her connection. So Sonia, would you like to start by sharing what has really worked in what you have done, like meditation and the courageous communication? What works?
Thanks, Maureen. I think this journey for me began when I first was finding difficulty in my own communication. And so I started to go on a journey, and especially around conflict resolution. And normally you learn conflict resolution from your parents, and most of us do not have great role models in this area. So I went on a search, found nonviolent communication through various pathways, and it's also known as compassionate communication. And the course we run in the prison, Lucinda Young and I, is called Courageous Communication. And fundamentally, its core is to look at our values and what's important to us. And through that lens, we start to connect to each other, because what is important to me is also important to you. And when we can find that bridge that connects us, it takes away so much blame and shame, and actually gives us a bridge to connect. So we, a few years ago, I started running compassionate communication in our central Victorian town in the Goldfields. Had a great time doing that, did lots of training. And then one of my passions has been to do social change work. And for some reason in my life, prisons have really stood out to me to be a place where I would want to contribute. So through a grant, and Ross, who's on this call, really helped open that doorway for me to go into the local prison, the medium and low security prison for men, and begin this journey of teaching courageous communication. This course is available in the States, has been for 20 years. The Freedom Project is one that has been using that. But what I have found from many years ago, I began when I was about 19 to start meditating, and found that so helpful. And so within the course, we create a very safe circle where we meditate first. And I always ask, has anyone meditated here before? And usually we only have one or two, sometimes no one has meditated. And I find by the end of the 10 weeks, it's a 10-week course, 2 hours per session, that there is so much that they value just in that mindfulness and the meditation that we do at the beginning of the session and at the end of the session. So that creates automatically a sense of becoming more aware of self and what's going on. And most of them haven't even tried that experience of just even connecting to their body, or what's it like to feel my feet and my hands. So I find that in itself is really powerful. And then the content of the course is very much, we keep it really simple, because its main aim is to, one, look at our thinking and how our thinking has got us to where we are today, and using some processes and very simple models to become aware of what we think and how that affects our actions. So choosing our thinking is something we use, where we look at our blame thoughts towards other people when a situation arises that we're triggered in, or we look at our own blaming judgment thoughts of ourselves and how these things separate us from each other. And then we really work on pausing to reframe, and then we start to use the NVC model, which is to tune into what we're feeling and what do I value here, what's important to me, what needs are alive for me, which could be, you know, to be heard, to be understood, to belong. And one of my mentors, Peggy Smith, she really brought home to me that the main thing that we do in this, in joining with these people, with these men in these sessions, is to really connect to that I matter and that they matter. And if that's all we do, then that's enough. Because really, ultimately, we want to belong and we really want to matter in this world. And when those things aren't available, we tend to do very drastic things to try and make that happen sometimes. Very tragic things sometimes that end us in prison. Yeah, I don't know if that's enough.
Sonia, you shared with me that when you do the meditation, it surprised you, the atmosphere that was created and the receptivity. Do you want to just speak for a little bit?
Yes. I think it's because it just allows for that. It gives an invitation to start self-reflecting. And in that space, we start to see our world in a different way. We start to expand and start to see that maybe there's a different way to view the world as we start to reconnect to ourselves. And also it creates, for some people, it's like the first time they really got a sense of that inner peace that can be available without, you know, without any other substances, or that this is just available by just sitting and observing. It can also be really difficult as well, but we have lots of techniques that we bring in, lots of mindfulness techniques, not just focusing on the breath, but there's many other aspects that we use as well. using 5 senses, what you can hear, what you can see, what you can smell. One of the things that really stood out for me doing this work was because what we do is we get to sit with what we care about, what our needs are and what our feelings are. And then we switch and we start to, in a situation that we might have been upset about, we tune into what may have been, what the other person may have been feeling. Just guessing, of course, and what they may have been needing in that moment of this conflict that we might have had together. And I'll just never forget when one of the men said that he'd never put himself in the shoes of, in this situation, of his daughter. He had just never thought that that's what might have been her experience. And he was actually devastated for a moment, because he realized, like, wow, this is what she might have been going through when I did this. And it was very powerful, because from that place, when you see your impact on another person, you start to change how you act. And I don't know, I want to live in a world where if we can be more aware of our impacts, we're more responsible and there's less violence. And that's really important to me. And to know that there are ways we can do that through communication and through self-awareness is so powerful to me. Yeah, and which is why the passion for me to offer this work where I can.
Yeah, I really like what you said, that, you know, without going anywhere, without having anything, we can just create that peace within. And I can imagine how that is very helpful in a prison situation. So thank you very much, Sonia, for all that sharing and all that you do. And you mentioned that Ross had actually opened the door for you, because Ross was working as the programmer, you know, on the programs. So Ross, would you like to share what you've had some great success with your own programs in prisons? Would you like to share some of your successes?
Yeah, I'm delighted to. I suppose programs in general, basically programs that engage men or young men or women, young women, and to help them maybe sometimes get out of their comfort zone, and help them maybe shift their beliefs or change their beliefs, and try to connect, like what Sonia was saying about, you know, the impact their actions have on who they care for the most, which is usually their family and friends, but particularly the family. So we've had great success in engaging the men to do this. I mean, we had one program, was a simple values program, connecting values to their actions. And a man came out and said that should be taught in every school, that should be in every curriculum. But it was simple stuff that they hadn't been exposed to, that opportunity to think about their values and think about their actions, and the positive impact. We also had the Read Along Dads program in prison, which is trying to connect the men to their children. And for them to be better dads, and then for them to have that belief that they could be better dads, and the belief that they could, have a positive impact for their children. So we would record they would choose a book, record their stories. Sometimes they'd have to repeat the person reading it because of their literacy. And then we would design craft programs, and for them to make CD covers, bookmarks, men from all walks of life in the one room sharing, animal stickers and cutting up coloured string to really give something back to their children, and then the children would receive the book, the CD, and listen to it every night. It was a great way to connect. But and so that maybe shifted their belief system, and really, and I suppose a program that engaged them as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, I've actually worked in some prisons and drug rehab centers in Vietnam. And, you know, in fact, we even got to the point where the people coming out who had come out of the drug rehab centers were presenting on TV, values education, and, you know, understanding something like love, which is so complicated. And we can go so wrong with just something like love. So, yeah, what you're doing to really enable the men to see that they can love and they do love, and there is a, you know, that self-worth is really very, very valuable. So thank you, Ross. And Claire, I believe you've done something, am I right? 27,000 interviews with people living in prisons. Claire?
Unmute, Claire.
I needed to do that, you know, because what's the other wonderful thing happening in our space working from home? It's animals. So I had to mute while the dogs were having a play. So hopefully they've settled down again. For those who know me, I do have a few justice hats, and I've been in the space for a long time. Probably the big pivotal time for me was in 2015 when I undertook a Churchill Fellowship, which took me to various countries and where I spoke to many, many people. And that's maybe where you thought, yes, I've spoken to lots and lots of people. The project was to study the role of ex-prisoners as peer mentors in reintegration. And how I came to that idea was through years of doing professional work, but also through personal experience, through ex-partner who I'd seen go, you know, through the system many times. And I'd been doing all the professional side of things as well. And it wasn't until a time in his last period of incarceration where I went to visit him, and out of the blue he said to me, I don't know how to be straight. I don't know how you live the way you live. And it dawned on me then in that visit yard that no matter what any of us have been doing, it's not enough, and there's something missing here, something missing. And then I came across by accident some agencies overseas, one called CRIS in Sweden, Criminals Returning in Society. And this was an agency where there were former criminals, drug addicts, delivering programs and developed their own agencies across prisons in Sweden. And I thought, hang on a minute, I think I've just thought of a missing link. And it's the people who have been there, done that, and come through the other side that are then helping those that are in the system, hence, and struggling to know what it's like to live a straight world as we do. So no matter what, I guess I've felt that I'd given personally and professionally, it wasn't enough. On the Churchill Fellowship, I was blown away. I was inspired beyond anything. I met with so many people who had been through the prison system across the whole of the UK, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland. I went to Sweden. I met that agency that I was first inspired with. I felt like a little in the land of the giants. They're incredible people. And then I went into New York City as well. I went to the Bronx. I went to Harlem. It was commonplace that people who had been through the system, there they were, natural born entrepreneurs, so developed their own agencies, were employing people with criminal records and going into the prisons. When I came back, it took a couple of years, but good friends with Deakin University, and were able to get philanthropic funds. And we trialled a peer mentoring, a through the gate peer mentoring program in a prison in Victoria. And I can tell you, the working with the people in the prison to develop this, quite unique, and to get it even into an ad in a local newspaper. Anyone been in prison, we need you. And to then have people who had been in prison before going back into the prison and talking to people one-on-one, or in the groups of either remanded or sentenced prisoners, is the most inspirational thing you can see. You could hear a pin drop. The comments coming back were, now I know what hope looks like. Now I can actually believe that I can change because these people are saying how they did it, and the troubles and the difficulties and how you navigate that, and really cutting to the chase. And if I can just finish with some of the key things that I learnt on that Churchill Fellowship, that people such as Use a Voice in the United Kingdom say, only offenders can stop reoffending. As Glenn Martin, who founded Justice Leadership USA, says, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but further from the resources to make the difference. And even if you can have a look at what the former PM David Cameron in the UK said in 2015, after I'd come back from my trip, he made a profound, inspirational prison reform speech. He says things like, let's find the diamonds in the rough and help them shine. I'll finish on that.
So thank you so much for that sharing. When I started to look into what's happening within the prison system in Australia, I found pockets of really wonderful activities, programs that are happening, but really they were quite small pockets. And my vision for a better normal as we go forward is to really make things like mentoring, meditation, nonviolent communication mainstream. Do you think that's possible in Australia? And what would it take? It's an open question to any of you.
That's a really good question, and it really is the crux of it, Maureen, because across Australia we have wonderful pilot programs going that, you know, run on the smell of an oily philanthropic rag, you know, and they end. There's so many, evaluations that get done, and then they get dust collected on them. And then people will think, hang on a minute, I've got an idea, let's start it again. And you can imagine the cost that must go in to all these little programs that fold and start again, fold and start again. And I think it is about collectively, we know what works. You know, we do know what works, and it's about that will, as you said, Sonia. Where there's a will, there's a way. Sometimes it's political will, but sometimes it's just about getting that grassroots, making it happen at a local level, embedding it at a local level, and then inspire others with it as well. But maybe as well, we need to.
I would say that.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, maybe that's where these opportunities come in, and Victor, thank you for this as well. If we can get other people interested, and it's thank goodness for the philanthropics. We don't have, you know, the big lottery like they have in the UK that funds a lot of programs. We need to get business, we need to get corporates, we need to get a lot more interest in how we can get what works really embedded in the system.
Why, Sonia, would you think that, or maybe also Ross, who's worked in programming, I think things like meditation, mentoring, NVC, I would say they're quite cost effective, actually. And I think they would save costs down the line with regards to security, if there could be an effective program that's offered to bring peace into people's lives who are incarcerated. So why would you say we need funding from private sources? Why wouldn't it come from the government? Why not?
Are you asking me, Maureen? I did hear you say Sonia, but
anyone. Sorry, yeah, sorry, Sonia.
I know I heard you say my name. I thought, oh,
I did.
Yeah. Well, I think in one way, what I'm thinking of that's coming up for me is that it's also a systemic problem. Like, we actually getting it out there, like Claire was saying, starts to change the thinking of the systems that are in place, because we can go in there and we can introduce these wonderful skills and programs to people in prison, yet the people running the prison are still functioning from a different paradigm. And the men would often say, oh, the prison officers need this course. So it's not really even about just the men in prison or the women in prison getting this training. It's actually, we all need to start shifting where we come from. And so shifting the systems, that's a bigger problem and it's a bigger issue. However, hearing Claire, I'm thinking getting that private backing helps to start seeing the issue that we've got and how much it costs to have people in prison. Like you say, it's actually more cost effective to rehabilitate, bring these skills in so that when people leave, they have something that they can hang on to, and possibly, hopefully, it's not that easy, but to not return to prison. But the other thing so the Freedom Project in the States teaches NVC, nonviolent communication, and mindfulness together. And it's been running for 20 years. And one of our mentors that is part of the Freedom Project is an ex-prisoner. So what Claire is pointing to about mentoring is so important. And also what they found, they did some studies on, because they've been doing it for so long, that recidivism, I cannot remember the exact figure, but I think it went down to, in the States it's a lot higher, but I think it dropped about 10% for those that had or 20% even, for those that had attended the course. So there's a lot of power in that and a lot of change that's available if we get the resources to do it.
Yeah, Marshall Rosenberg spoke about restorative justice, right? These are the words, rather than punitive. And that's the big shift, isn't it? Rather than thinking of the prison system as punishing for those who have done wrong, restoring the justice, that's the big shift that we would like to see. I'd like to also ask Ross, what do you think, Ross, about, because you've worked in programming?
Yeah, it needs a big systemic change, Maureen. Pretty much the men and women in prison are the ones that need the most support, but they're in the most unsupportive environment. And it needs to, I think it's a whole community approach in regards to funding. The cost benefit is there, over $100,000, whatever it is, for each prisoner for a year. Recidivism rates 40%. So things aren't working as it is. So it definitely needs a change. And from my experience in the prisons, the men and women, they're sponges for learning, and they really want to improve themselves. There's a very small minority that aren't in that bracket, but a lot of them, we've got queues of in the list to take up these programs. So the benefits there. You can there's even investment options that you can do for a positive return rate. Yeah, so there's definite ways to get it through, but it comes down from the top, and comes down from leadership and the prison environment needs to realise that 99% of the men and women will leave prison and live next door and live in the community. There's a certain stereotype about the prisoner and the ex-prisoner, and that needs to change as well. So any programs that engage and having that mentoring sometimes is that a lot of the programs can be complementary, but they're all coming from very different backgrounds. Lack of education opportunities, some trauma. And they're all on their different pathways. Some will it'll trigger pretty quickly, but others they need a lot of support. Yeah, but it does require a whole systemic change, and Singapore's a great leadership scenario there, where the whole community is involved in the rehabilitation and transformation of prisoners.
Oh, it would be good to hear more about that. But I also understand that Victor's very good friend Lindsay is on the call, and perhaps I could invite Victor and Lindsay to speak to this.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks very much, Maureen. In fact, one of, as you know, the Centre for Optimism has run a few experimental programs in optimism in prison, and what was it was really so profound that we were asked to do work with management. So I think everything that Ross and Claire and Sonia say, you know, it's not just prisoners who need this. You know, the meditation and the optimism and the like is needed at every level of prison official. Lindsay's online, I can see. Lindsay, if you're dressed, if you could start your video. But there's a question from an anonymous attendee, and anyone else who wants to ask a question, you can do it on Q&A, and I know there's a couple of other people who've got questions that they've told me about. Someone says, look, prisons don't like rehabilitation because they need the inmates to be profitable. How do we change their mindset? So the Victorian system is sort of mixed, isn't it, between government run and some commercial entities. Anyone got a view on that? Do prisons really like rehabilitation?
Oh, I might jump in there. I think I mean, prisons come under government funding or other companies. So the prison itself doesn't necessarily want that. I mean, of course, there's jobs and it creates jobs, and I tend to always go back as well, though, to the individual person, and through all the people that I met on all the agents, to all the countries I went to on my Churchill Fellowship, but also the people who became our peer mentors in our trial in Victoria. Now, each of them had their own journey that they went through the prison system. 2 of them had been in once. 1 had been in and out quite a few times. They all got to a point where they'd had enough. But also, the 2 in particular who had only been in the 1 time said prison is exactly what they needed, and it worked. Because they found out through whatever program it was, or the time that then they had to work on themselves, that's what made the difference. Even it's been said as well from agencies I met overseas, is that some people, when they're having chaotic lives, they need containment. And they need that. So for my mind, it's about us and agencies and services. We get our act together, we coordinate, we work together, and we are there for people, and we deliver our programs, and we're there for people when they're ready to take on board whatever resonates with them at the time. And it's incredible how one particular, these ex-offender mentors that we had said it was just one little program that talked about worry and how you can avoid worrying, that stuck with him, and it stuck with him for the years since. And he goes, that's it, now I've got it, you know. And it was also through a Salvation Army prison chaplain who just kept coming to visit him, and he felt that somebody cared. They're the tiny things that make the huge difference. So I think, and even thinking back to that prison speech by David Cameron, he said, let's not get lost in this existential questions about tough on crime or being soft on crime. It's about getting in there with the individuals that need us and need the help. But we can't change them. They will change when they're ready to change. It's up to us to just provide what might be what they need.
As Gandhi said, the only person we can change is ourselves, Claire. Now, Lindsay, you've been involved in city design, societal design. You've been involved in running huge government departments. What have you seen that works? And listening to Ross and Claire and Sonia and Maureen, how can we make these things more readily available to prisoners and people leaving prison?
Well, look, I mean, you ask people why they're optimistic, Victor, and I, with the wisdom of hindsight, have become a tremendous optimist because when I did the review of the Victorian corrections system back in the 80s, it's a long, long time ago now, it was what it was. It was a bunch of old bluestone prisons, all of them in terrible shape, people having to live in extraordinarily bad conditions, queuing up in the rain for meals, no dining facilities, you know, really, really awful conditions. People with mental illnesses in shocking. Anyway, it was dreadful. I wrote a very aggressive and angry report, really, about closing the bluestone prisons. And it was quite a challenge for the government to accept and then take on that report. But they did, and subsequent governments followed and dramatically changed the Victorian prison system in very short order. And that was very brave, I felt, of governments in the face of a lot of community scepticism. And so that, you know, from my point of view, I was optimistic, made to be optimistic about the capacity of governments to be very courageous about reform, because that's what they were. I mean, even if I didn't necessarily agree with the privatisation of many elements of the system, it seems to have worked. It's certainly in terms of creating capacity. I don't agree with increasing capacity in the way that's been done, but nevertheless, policies led to increases in necessary capacity. And I think along with those increases in capacity, we've also seen a lot of growing sophistication in programs inside prisons. I think that whole field has dramatically changed over certainly since when I was, as I said used to say to my children, you can go and say your father's been in every prison in Victoria. And I had many times. And that, you know, you talk about programs, there were none. You know, making number plates was about the best of them. Beyond that, you know, young men, 18 to 23-year-olds, spending, you know, much of the day doing nothing else to occupy their time than arguing with each other and trying to find ways of getting out. And really, though there have been, you know, vast improvements in what's being able to be offered and the conditions under which programs are being able to be offered in the prison system over the years since, which is terrific. I'm sure there's a lot more to be done, but it's a very, very different system today than what it was then.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Oh, Maureen, please.
No, I was just saying it's really wonderful to hear that and to hear that much change has happened. Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for that. And I think, Victor, we might have had some other friends, Stella, Felice. Are they with us?
We had a little problem with the link. I'm not sure what has quite gone wrong, but I will make sure on episode 2 of our event that there will be no difficulties with links. Ross, Claire and Sonia, have you got a question you want to ask of Lindsay, you know, given that long historical context?
Yeah, look, thanks, Lindsay. Fascinating. So was there anything though that you noticed that may have worked in the old system but not necessarily working this time round?
It's very hard to say. I mean, the old system had so many features you would never see now. I mean, F division dormitories, it's just shocking places, locked up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon with 48 men and let out, you know, at 10 o'clock the next day. I mean, they were just terrible places. You know, the up at Ararat, the horrible conditions under which people were kept and beach work, people with mental illnesses locked away and really kept sedated. Those things you would never see now. Probably the better programs that were available were in fact available to people with really long sentences. The people who were in there for the 3-week cycle, the young men, short-term offenders, were basically neglected. I mean, they were running sort of motel accommodation in and out in 3 weeks, and that's it. They had nothing on offer for those young men, nothing at all. So it was really the long sentence offenders who were able to have some kind of an offer, but for the short-term prisoners, nothing. And I'm sure that's better. It's better now for them, but not then.
Lindsay and Claire, when I was a young boy, I lived in the shadows of Pentridge. And when I was in the University Debating Society, we used to go and debate the very long-term murderers. And in some humour, I've got to say, we never tried to win the debate. We always wanted to lose by a couple of points. But there were some of those programs, weren't there, Lindsay, in terms of progress? And
the long-term guys were well looked after, no question.
So Ross and Claire and Sonia, I mean, most of your work is with sort of medium security prisoners, isn't it? Do you see any of those shorter term prisoners and the programs that are available to them today?
Go, Ross.
Yeah, there's there are better transition programs, but sometimes when you've got a short sentence, then there's not too much on offer, because there's just not enough time. So that is a flaw in the system. But the transition and linking to accommodation is improving, but it's still some flaws in there.
The majority are still 2 to 3 weeks, aren't they?
I think maybe a bit longer than that, Lindsay. Yeah.
Right.
I mean the accommodations changed as well. I think there's some positive things about the shared accommodation and sharing a unit together. Yes, so that's been good, but sometimes short sentences and some men, might know that they're going to be out, so they don't really respect someone's living area. So it can be a learning and also a bit of a negative as well.
So Alex Bradfield wanted to ask the panelists a question about families. Alex? You have to unmute, Alex. As I said, the new Oxford entry.
No, I was in passive mode. Thank you, Victor. And I'm sorry to have appeared a little bit late in the piece, but I'm most interested. I was a trustee of a philanthropic group, and one of the areas that we supported were the incarcerated and their families. So I'm interested to know from those of you here who are so much more expert than I am in this field, what do you think is needed for the families of those who are incarcerated, and also how to maintain the relationship, which is so important? I did see once, I attended a women's prison when it was open to the public and the families of those who were incarcerated, and I will never forget it because grandmother brought the child of one of the prisoners, for instance, and at the end the prisoner actually ran because it was just too painful to say goodbye to her little child. I've never forgotten that. So I can see that the relationship between the prisoner and the families is so important in terms of when they get out and what's happened to that relationship. Any thoughts?
I might jump in there. Certainly from the professional side, and especially during this the COVID time, I think the way that the correction system has supported the connection between prisoners and their families through video visits and has been fabulous, and it's kind of brought a whole new element into it that I think could probably continue. From the personal side that I experienced for many years, There's a lot I'd change. We're siloed. Prisons are about the person in there, and then there's the family or the friends out there, and sure, you come in to visit. It's not enough. If I was to do all that again, certainly it's still an area that I'd want to do something more with, because it's a passionate area I feel about. Families or those close people who are still connected on the outside need to be involved from the beginning, and need to be almost involved as you would in a hospital setting. Can you imagine in a hospital setting, if you, the family member, can only come in to visit certain times, but you will never get to speak to the doctor, you will never get to speak to the nurse, and you will never really be involved around the table on a discharge plan. That's what happens in the prison system. I remember in the very early days, about 20 years ago, but it was a lovely worker from an NGO that said to me, "Oh, look, you're a social worker, you'll be fine, won't you?" And I thought, I'm not his social worker. So it's really, it's been about that, you know, almost in the last, you know, period of time before release. It's check, you know, do you have somewhere to go? Do you have a family member? It's the call. Are you okay to take this person and have this person come home? And then sure enough, in the majority of cases, chaos ensues within 2 weeks. So I think if you can start from the beginning, get everybody who is involved in that person's life in a positive way, involved with everything that's happening, and continue through that journey. I think if we did that, we wouldn't be having conversations around post-release homelessness, for starters.
I think an hour has almost rushed by. We've got about another 5 or 6 minutes. And Lucy, I know you wanted to add something on family visits, and Glenn, you wanted to make a comment and ask a question. So I wonder if we can go in that order, and then Maureen, if we can maybe go around the circle with concluding comments. So Lucy, if you want to add your comment, and then you, Glenn, with your comment and question.
Thanks, Victor. Yeah, I did put it in the chat, and it was really, I think, in relation to some of my earlier comments as well, that when we have a system that's set up around punishment rather than one that recognises that people are perhaps the circumstances through which they've been brought up, or the system has taken them to a place of being incarcerated, that when we have a system of punishment, everything flows from that. And so if we're able to have a fundamental shift towards prisons as places of healing, and things like family visits become an essential part of the process of, you know, stepping outside of society for a time where healing can happen, and society doesn't have to be subjected to the behaviours that come out of trauma and so on. So, you know, I think while we have the current paradigm of where prisons are places of punishment, we're going to have all sorts of restrictions that are going to continue to inflict harm on people.
Yeah, no, good point.
Not very optimistic, I know. I'm sorry, but
well, we have to be realistic as well as being optimistic. Glenn.
Thank you. First of all, my apologies for being late. Lucy, I just love that vision that I get when I heard you say places of healing instead of punishment. And also the thud that came afterwards for me was, how? Or maybe it's a long road to travel. And that's okay. I think pretty much from what I hear today, everybody's in it for the long haul. So that's encouraging and inspiring, and I'm really happy to be here. And I also really like what you said, Victor, about being optimistic and realistic, and trying to find ways that we can, well, Sonia and Lucy have already started to find ways here, and other people as well that I haven't previously met. So just trying to find some way to start this process, to really latch onto something, to get a grip somewhere, is what I'm kind of left with. And I mean, yes, I did make the comment before that that I was apologizing almost for it being skeptical, but basically that, you know, if we're only offering long-term offenders these programs that are so worthwhile, then eventually all the short-term ones, or from what I can understand from the figures before of 40% reoffend, all the short-term ones will eventually get it. But isn't our idea of healing going to be for everybody, not just like when they all come back 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 times? So it seemed really unusual to hear that. And I also loved what Claire said about the family being siloed. Yeah, that really brought it back to me, especially, or as you have aging parents, people have often been in that system where they are left out or included, or different degrees of that in the hospital system. So that was a great analogy for me to really take it home to me. And I'm saying that because sometimes I think those analogies are needed so that other people, you know, really feel it and get it as well. So thank you for that. That was really, really pinpointed it, you know, for me. Yeah, that's all I've got really. Thanks for asking.
Wonderful, Glenn. No, I've had some funny stories. I had a very, very long-term prisoner who is a murderer look around at his colleagues in my workshop and say, "You've got to be an optimist to survive in here. You've got to be an optimist to thrive when you leave prison, because it's going to be a hard job, hard to get a job, hard to get a business loan." He said, "But if you come back in here, you'd be a complete something wit." And he's there for another 15 years. So it was very solid advice from someone experienced in the system. So look, Maureen, I think this is the start of a series of conversations. I am utterly inspired by everyone who's spoken. So I'm just wondering, Maureen, if it suits you, if we go round the room with a final sentence and conclusion, and then if you can round it off and thank the guests, Maureen.
Right.
So
Sure.
Ross, how would you conclude after this fabulous hour in which you've inspired us to action and optimism?
Yeah, thanks, Victor. Yeah, a couple of things: better family-friendly visiting rooms, visiting areas, and just involving the community and just creating a more humane system. The community is a great indication that these people are coming off their own bat to support us, and there's a lot of opportunities for community to be involved. So that would be one thing I'd leave with.
Claire?
We need to get more people with the lived experience involved in helping reform the system. And definitely I have to advocate and push for expanding or getting back on track the Through the Gate peer mentoring that's as a result of my fabulous inspirational Churchill Fellowship. If the UK can do it, we can do it.
Exactly. In fact, someone gave me a statistic on their success against violent crime in the last few years, with some really simple stuff like not having piles of rubble next to pubs where people have brawls. And they've reduced the level of injury just by sensible cause analysis of why people were getting head injuries. So, no, your Churchill Fellowship was money and time well spent, Claire. Sonia, I love your passion for meditation. How would you round off the conversation?
I've got a few things. I've just wanted to just recap from what I heard Claire and a few others say, just about in regards to where to next, and about families. I wanted to acknowledge that sometimes families are very far away and cannot actually access visiting whoever's in prison. So that's really difficult. So offering support to actually visit families in prison that are more than an hour or two away. So that was one thing that came up. And the other thing was having a criminal record, how difficult that is when you come out and there's no acknowledgement of, you know, you might have done 2 degrees in prison, or done lots of courses, self-development, and that's not acknowledged when you come out. So to have that seen that, yes, I did create a situation where I went to prison, but this is who I am now. So seeing that, And on a very practical level, I was so shocked to hear how much a phone call costs in prison in this system where we have mobiles that are, you know, there is no cap and we can talk forever. I don't understand it. Yeah. It makes me angry. And also to understand that now with COVID, suddenly Zoom and Skype are available and it's free. I hope it's free for the men in prison. And also that this situation with the pandemic means that, well, Lucy and I don't know about Claire, Lucy and I are not able to work in the prisons at the moment. Our program got truncated halfway through at the women's prison in Tarrangower. And just, yeah, so something about that, about access to courses, even when we can't go in, because now they're visitors, they're not seeing people physically, just all on screen. Sorry. And one more thing that I really wanted to name that I'd forgotten earlier was together for me with Optimism is holding grief and mourning. We need to mourn all the loss that we see in this world right now, which is so big. And from that, my optimism grows from the flip side of that. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity, Victor.
Absolutely fantastic. Lindsay, with that long-term view, how would you round off the conversation?
Well, I think, Victor, one of the things that's clearly observable, this is a global issue. Everyone faces it. And there are new concepts and new ideas being developed all the time. So I'm fascinated by the Churchill Fellowship trip that I think was Claire, was reporting on, or Sonia? And observation of what's going on internationally means that there are new doors opening on new ideas all the time. So I think that, again, you can be optimistic about learning new things and finding new things to apply. So taking advantage of the broader picture is always, I think, very helpful here as well.
Fantastic. Well, Maureen, you assembled us. You are an inspiration to me. You are an inspiration to thousands of people around the world for what you've done in education everywhere from Hong Kong to Cambodia and Taiwan and India and beyond. How will you round off the conversation and thank our guests?
Well, I'm sure many of us have been left with more questions than when we started, and probably more things to say. And thank you very much, Victor, for giving us this platform. And as you said, we would hope to have another one. But I just want to know if there's anywhere where all of these people with skills and ideas and insight can communicate. So maybe that's something to look at in the future so that there's, a platform for that. So I just want to thank you, Victor, very much that you give this platform to whoever would like to see something better, a better normal. And I thank Ross very much, and Claire and Sonia for the time. I know you're all busy people and it's just a lot of passion has come through today. Lindsay, for your experience and for, really reminding us that, things have improved dramatically in a few decades. So, now things are going faster and faster. Hopefully they'll improve in a decade what they did in the last 4. So yeah, just a big thank you to everyone who's joined us today, to our panelists, and let's hope that we can have another one of these and we can find a platform where it can be an ongoing communication.
Well, as Maureen said, wonderful event and we hope you enjoyed it. We'd love to have you involved in the Centre for Optimism. You can go to the website there and sign up for a free newsletter, or you can sign up for membership and build this rich community made up of optimists acting to make it a better world. Hope you have a great day and thank you for joining us.